Hello, everyone. What's going on? Lucas Jackson and Jaddy Josh here for another weekly edition of the Talking Crap podcast. And today
that was very aggressive.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about strong style. When it comes to Japanese wrestling. I thought, let me get in the spirit of things. Yeah, that's right. We are the episode Lost in Translation, as we're discussing the differences in styles between American wrestling and Japanese wrestling. Which is a subject which obviously is very close to Porter's heart. I am acting more as a moderator here. So obviously, while I have things to be saying, it's not my area of expertise. So I want that said now so people don't, get angry if I don't know who certain people are. But look, we do have a guest, as always, for this. And to help us discuss, he's actually a returning guest as well, as he was on an episode way back in season 1, actually. One of our first guests. He's a former DKW Tag Team champion and a close friend of ours at the Talking Crap channel. This is Jack Walker. Right, thank you for joining us, Jack. And we're discussing something which I know very dear to your heart, you're fond of also. We're discussing Japanese wrestling. And so we're going to start basically with, as you know, I'm not the biggest Japanese wrestling fan. I've watched some content this week to be able to obviously try to keep up with what some of you guys are saying, but the people might not know about Japanese wrestling, more so than obviously what they see through the big promotion like AEW and WWE. What's the appeal? Start first with you, Jack.
Okay, so the appeal to me is it's different. It's different from wrestling from all over the world. The thing that I love most about Japanese wrestling is it doesn't need a story. It will tell the story in the match, and by the end of the match, the story will be finished, or the story will continue, but it will involve another match or involve a new participant. There's no need to watch every single detail of a show to understand what's going on. My main issue is stuff like WWE or AEW or anything mainly westernized is if I miss a week, I need to do research, I need to catch up, I need to do everything. But if I miss 4 months worth of New Japan, all I've got to do is watch about half an hour of it and I'll know exactly what's going on through the wrestling or through the commentators, or it will be told to me like I'm stupid, basically. It'll be like, this is what's happening, watch it. And I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. I'm watching it and I love it.
So yeah. Same question to you then, Porter. What's the appeal about Japanese wrestling? What's different about it from the stuff we see in WWE, AEW, and Impact, etc.?
I think really for me is the fact that it's not a theatrics. Well, it is, but it's treated like a real sport in Japan. Very much so in the sense of if nine times out of 10, if you see a wrestler punch another wrestler, they probably legit just punched him in the face. They don't pull their punches as much. It's real hard hitting, which is where the term strong style comes from. But I think the whole appeal of it is because there's no, as Jack said, there's no storyline. It's treated like a real sport. There's no massive theatrics. The most you'll have is a theme song and some pyros at most to make it theatrical. But I honestly think it's just where it's such a hard-hitting style and there's no theatrics whatsoever. It's treated like a real sport is what I like the most.
Yeah, that presentation, obviously, it's something which obviously AEW have been trying, I guess, with the whole ranking system, and obviously they do with bigger fights present it a bit more real. And WWE, obviously, through having people like Brock Lesnar, when they presented his matches as more kind of a real thing. But yeah, there is definitely, I guess, that edge, to Japanese kind of stuff. We'll talk about Wrestle Kingdom. And it was that one of the matches which obviously, Jack recommended and something I've recently just watched. I've watched with wrestling match I watched was obviously Shinsuke versus Kota Ibushi. And there's interesting things about both those two actually that come into probably all our points today, really, as they're workers who have taken different paths to wrestling from Japan into America, as we'll get to very soon. But Wrestle Kingdom, is it definitely the biggest kind of non-mania show of the year then, I guess?
Yeah, it is. Especially for me, it's my WrestleMania. For someone who doesn't really watch WWE at all, I watch NXT as much as I can. But now it's on a week delay.
Yeah.
So I know everything that's going to happen before it happens. So it kind of ruins it for me a little bit. But I watch Mania, I watch Rumble, I watch SummerSlam, but I don't really watch anything else unless I'm there when it's happening. I don't really stay up anymore to watch wrestling, anything like that. But with Wrestle Kingdom, it's always something since I can remember watching my first one, which was Wrestle Kingdom 9, that I've just looked forward to every year. And obviously I've been to one, so maybe that's
a
little
makes
bit
a bit of
bias.
bias for it as well. But yeah, for me, it's the greatest wrestling show, purely wrestling show on the planet, and that's including Mania.
Yeah, I mean that would be a fair statement because obviously Mania is obviously the grand spectacle. It's the, it's the big budget. It's the angles. It's it's everything about it. I guess so. That would be a fair statement. Paul, would you agree? I guess because you're nodding along.
Yeah, I'd say so. I personally prefer Wrestle Kingdom. Not necessarily because I prefer one promotion to another, because I don't really have a preferred promotion unless we're talking about TNA, in which case I have to. But because it's not TNA anymore, I'm not allowed to say it's my preferred promotion. But when it comes to Mania type events, Wrestle Kingdom's my favorite one by far, because it's just a massive night of fighting. It's no story.
2 nights now, isn't it?
Huh?
2 nights last year.
Yeah. Like you've got 2 massive nights of fighting with nothing you need. The thing with Wrestle Kingdom is you could not watch New Japan for the whole year and just watch Wrestle Kingdom, and you will know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that's what Jack kind of said in the first point too.
100%.
Exactly. That's the perks of it. Is it's something you can just watch whenever.
Yeah, I guess you could argue that with WrestleMania, like with the part-timers come back, the casual fans, if you see Goldberg and Lesnar and Undertaker on a card, you kind of figure out, okay, these are just kind of big matches that you can kind of watch. But yeah, I guess with Wrestle Kingdom, they put the emphasis on the wrestling, obviously, side of things. So we're moving on now to talking about Japanese stars, obviously, in America. And there are a plethora of them at the moment. Like I lost count at one stage, but particularly with the women at the moment, a lot of the American promotions are taking up a lot of the Japanese women, whether that be obviously Rio and Hikaru Shida in AEW. Obviously, you've got Io Shirai, Asuka, both in WWE and NXT. But what goes wrong with some of the big Japanese stars? Like obviously Kenta, Hideo Itami, he had a not really successful run in the WWE before obviously going back to Japan. So what is it that you think it doesn't click when Japanese stars come over to America? Starting first with you, Jack.
It's for me, it's lack of direction. I think if you look at a Japanese wrestler and go, he's a Japanese wrestler, he's finished. Like Shinsuke Nakamura got brought over not as the King of Strong Style, not as the performer that he is. He came over as the Japanese talent. And the second you label someone as their culture or their nationality, they're finished, unless they can translate. But I think unfortunately, when it comes to Japanese wrestlers, they can't translate using their culture as a gimmick. Is because they never do that. Like gimmicks aren't really a thing in Japan unless it's about their style of wrestling.
Yeah.
But the only gimmick that I can really think of in Japan from a Japanese wrestler is Toru Yano, who is a comedic wrestler. And the whole appeal of him is he can wrestle. He can probably out-wrestle most of the people on the card, but he prefers to entertain the crowd by making a joke out of it because no one else does it, and that's how he wins. But when you're using the gimmick as you're Japanese, go wrestle, it's just lack of direction. It works on the indies, but not on TV. Because for someone like you, Lucas, who doesn't watch Japanese wrestling, when you see someone who's a Japanese wrestler wrestling someone like John Cena, it just doesn't match. And then you're like, why should I care about him? He hasn't got a gimmick.
But you could argue that about a lot of luchadors. They just put on masks and just get told you're now L whatever. Off you pop. You're wrestling John Cena tonight. You're wrestling AJ Styles tonight. So, but they tend to have a better success rate overall. I think
it's because of the merch. if no one in the company's got a mask, and then you give someone a mask, that's a gimmick. But if you got two people with a masks, then you need to start thinking about actual gimmicks. And then, because most companies go, there's three people with a mask here, let's make them a tag team. So,
Yeah,
so we don't have to give.
Lucha House Party.
So, and then the Lucha House Party haven't got a gimmick. Their gimmick is their luchadors. And the one time that WWE had a luchador with a gimmick, which Phantasmo or Phantasma, I can't remember his name, they took the mask off him and changed his name because they just couldn't market him as a Mexican luchador with the mask.
Well, we also took Andrade's mask of him too, but obviously we're gonna,
But I mean, obviously that was before Andrade had joined WWE.
Yeah.
They took his mask off for his debut, whereas Phantasma, they turned it into a storyline.
He won the Cruiserweight Championship and then the next night ripped his mask off.
Yeah, and turned heel.
And it just didn't really make sense to me because you can be a heel with a mask.
Yeah, you can do. You can do. But I guess WWE always have that superhero image. I guess comes with masks, for being a family company. I'm guessing. But in terms of Japanese stars in America, then, like, who are the ones who? That's sort of a two-part question then. So, who are the ones who think have made a go of it and have actually worked out for? I would actually argue in a weird thing that Shinsuke might have actually worked out, like not to the level that maybe we thought he'd work out to, but to the level of he's been an IC champion, US champion, tag team champion. He's still wrestled like very regularly in the WWE for 3-4 years now. Was a big part of NXT when Paul and I were discussing it kind of off air, but when NXT was at an absolute boom period, the stuff he did with Samoa Joe and was just literally like peak NXT. So I'd say that he's maybe scraped a successful kind of run, out of the WWE. He's not got released. He's not injured. He likes a lifestyle. But yeah, so who has adapted well to it and who is doing well? And who would you like to maybe see from Japan come into things in America? Time versus you, Jack.
So I think Kenta has done it the best out of anyone. He was able to bring over the Japanese style to America and not lose his image. Wherever he goes, he's still Kenta. And I think when he joined NXT, he was hot. Everyone wanted to see him do well, and he was. But I think if it wasn't for the shoulder injury that he got, I think he would have been an NXT champion.
Yeah, it was 2 injuries he had, wasn't it? I think he had 2 injuries.
Straight after each other as well.
Yeah, he Kevin Nashed himself.
Yeah.
I like to call it.
100%. And then I think once you get injured twice in that fashion, you're gone, no matter what company it is.
Yeah.
I agree with Nakamura 100%. Although personally, I don't like what they've done to him. Again, that's because I'm a Nakamura fan from when he was the king of strong style in Japan. But I don't think you can deny that he is a WWE champion, NXT champion, out of Japanese stars in WWE. I think he might have done the best.
Maybe Asuka as well, I guess, have to be.
Asuka, she's done really well as well. But again, personally, I don't think Nakamura's done that great. But when you look at what he's done on paper, then he has. And I can imagine he's making really good retirement money from it as well.
Yeah, he said that he likes the lifestyle of America. This is what's unique about him. He likes American sports. He likes American movies. He likes American kind of everything. So for him, being in WWE it's part of his life. So he likes it. But I think obviously Kenta in particular, when he came over to America, he didn't adjust. And a lot of them, which I find quite interesting, going back to Tajiri, his wife stayed in Japan while he was wrestling in America, which is just, to me, it's just batshit. I'm just like, how are your wife going to live in not in another country, another continent, and she's going to stay there while you're, not like he went for 2 months and coming back. You're going on a full-time career in another country. I think Kenda, he couldn't adjust to obviously living in America, I don't think. But I think you're definitely right. By virtue of him, I guess, sitting out his contract for half the time being injured, and he was able to still obviously maintain his mystique. Same questions to you, Porter.
I don't think there's anyone other than Kenta that got it worst. Maybe Kairi Sane, but then again, Kairi Sane did go to the main roster and she was a champion in WWE at some point or another. But
until Nia Jax killed her.
yeah, but yeah, I'd argue that Kenta definitely got it the worst. Obviously, Hideo Itami in WWE before anyone sitting there going, "Who the fuck is Kenta?"
Well, I mentioned that the first minute I mentioned him. To be fair,
Yeah.
I said
But I'd say he definitely got it the worst because being injured twice, not having the chance to show his full potential. Because the moment he went back to New Japan, like within the first 6 months, he picked up the never openweight title.
Mm.
And I think he either won it or defended it at here in the UK at their first
He
UK event.
defended it.
Yeah. I was there. I remember watching it, but I don't remember if he was defending or picking it up.
Yeah, I think he was defending it. No, neither. He was in a
okay.
he was in a trio match.
It was a never openweight championship match.
Was it? I thought it was the 6-way.
No. That was I can't remember who that was, but I remember
So that was ages ago now.
Because Kenta was the never openweight championship match. I remember that.
Yeah, it was him and Suzuki.
Yeah, because I remember that being like one of my favorite matches on the card.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I remember now. It was him and Suzuki.
I definitely think Kenta had it worse though, in America at least. And then
who's doing best then? We like positivity.
I'd say it's a strong tie between Asuka and Nakamura. Maybe even Hikaru Shida, but she's not been in AEW for very long, so I don't want to give that a definitive answer. But I think being the longest reigning AEW Women's Champion may be quite a good tiebreaker there. But I'd say Asuka at the end of the day, because Asuka's had the most singles championships that weren't there aren't any women's mid-card titles anyway, but Asuka, I'd say, is possibly the best women's.
I'd argue that
so.
they made her feel very special. Like, definitely her initial streak and run through NXT. Questionable as to whether she should have lost to Charlotte, I guess, but that's for another discussion. But yeah, in terms of feeling important still, like 4 years on.
Yeah, I think in terms of success, not just cultural success, but championship success, I'd say Asuka's done it best. I think Nakamura's had better matches in NXT, but I think that's just because he had better opponents.
Yeah, fair enough. So we'll look at things the other way around then. So obviously American stars long talk about wrestling in Japan. Obviously in the 90s, a lot of the technical wizards, you had obviously, your Benoits, Jericho's, your Guerreros, Rey Mysterio, they all went over. Brian Pillman is also. And obviously now it is where the modern day kind of indie darlings find themselves, someone who I know you're a big fan of, Jack, Mr. Olivier himself, Kenny Omega. But do you think that by doing that they miss stuff, at home, so to speak? So obviously, if Kenny Omega didn't go to Japan, would he have been WWE signed by now?
Right. Before you start that point, carry on.
Yeah. So where we get up to again?
You had just finished a question, and Jack was about to answer it.
Oh, okay, so it's his actual answer. Okay, so you start answering.
I forgot what the question was.
Okay, I'll repeat the question then. So yeah. Now we'll look at things the other way around. So obviously, in terms of American stars, obviously for years you've had obviously Brian Pillman, Benoit, Jericho's, Guerrero, etc. all go over in the early 90s, leading to modern day. Someone I know you're a big fan of, Mr. Olivier himself, Kenny Omega, and Jay White, and many others go over to Japan. But as a result of doing that, do they miss out on opportunities, back home, as it were, back in the United States? So if Omega, for instance, had decided to stay in America, would he have been, WWE signed, maybe Impact signed, So yeah, have they missed out on opportunities, basically?
With Kenny Omega, no. If you watch Kenny Omega's old stuff from before Japan, watch his stuff from 2011, 10, he wasn't good. You wouldn't sign him based on who he was. Character-wise, 100%, but in-ring wise, definitely not. Especially after he quit WWE the first time, he just didn't ever want to go back. So I think when it comes to him, Japan was the only option. I think if he didn't go Japan, he would have left the business. I don't think there would have been a anywhere else. I think the only way it could have happened was how it happened. But then you've got some like uh, Prince Devitt or Finn Balor, who's in obviously one of the biggest names in NXT WWE now. I think if he didn't go Japan, he would still be where he is now. Possibly he might be a little bit worse off as he didn't have that character build, but I definitely think he'd be in that kind of NXT UK kind of moving forward, because he'd still be over here completely doing what he does best, is just work great matches. And I think they would have found him eventually regardless.
Because he was already obviously doing Progress and stuff, wasn't he, over here?
Yeah.
With the whole face paint shebang, and obviously it lent into thing. But yeah, I mean, people like Zack Sabre Jr. though, obviously, he's someone who's travelled obviously around the world.
Yeah.
But I guess obviously he is kind of most kind of known for the stuff he does obviously in Japan, and he has that obviously accolade of being viewed as by many the best technical wrestler kind of out there, which I guess he couldn't have done without going to Japan, because that's where those matches happen more often than not, So same question to you then, Josh.
Won't lie, might have forgotten the question. I was so busy listening to Jack's point that the question went out of my head.
Yeah, we basically asking, Omega, people like Omega, Jay White, etc., that are focused more on being in Japan. Like, has that cost them opportunities in America?
I'd have to say that I don't think it matters if it costs them in America, because if they cared about their opportunities in America, they would have stayed in America and honed their craft there. They wouldn't have gone to Japan if they cared about their careers in America. Is my thought anyway. But I'd say people like Jay White, Kenny Omega, and even Finn Balor, because if you look at Finn Balor, he's gone from Japan to America with no issue whatsoever, other than maybe some of the Japanese people now hating him for jumping ship. But I don't think they've lost their opportunities, because even Omega is now in America again.
Yeah.
I think it's all a matter of perspective. If you don't want to be in America, why are you going to America in the first place? Or why would you stay in America?
Yeah, I guess, the same thing about both ways, couldn't it?
Exactly.
I think another good point is when it comes to people like Jay White, Finn Balor, they trained in Japan. So, especially with Jay White, he wouldn't have ever gone to America if it wasn't for Japan, because that's where he learned. He was a young lion. The only reason he got exposure was because of the excursion he did, which was to Ring of Honor. So I think a lot of the times where you've got Westerners who are in Japan predominantly, it's because that's where they kind of learned how to hone their craft. So I think Japan is a really good breeding ground at the moment for future top stars, whether it be in Japan or America or the UK or wherever in the world.
I think as well that might be obviously why WWE are trying. They've been rumored with this NXT Japan thing. They must be seeing that talent is coming from that area. What like you said, whether it's traveling through. It seems weird to think that people leave America to go to Japan to go back to America, but obviously, as like Omega is proving, that is possible to do. And so one question that obviously we didn't answer it in the last bit. So kind of what stars do you think would do well that haven't obviously had a chance yet in America to do?
Jay White. If Jay White gets handled the way that Jay White should be handled, he will be the best wrestler in the world. And like for me, there's no distribution other than that. He's the best character in Japan, like just flat out. He's the best heel in the business for me at the moment. And I think he is the best heel whether you watch him behind the scenes or not. Because recently he cut a promo saying he might be leaving, and that's a promo where you have to go out of your way to watch. Yeah, it's everyone covering it, everyone's looking at it, and without even really understanding the contract he's in, everyone's immediately going, he's going to WWE, he's going to A&W. So I just think one promo like that can set the whole wrestling world off. He's the best that they've got to offer anyone else company-wise who's not Japanese. But for being Japanese, I'd say Naito would be their best export. As for me, he's the only one who's finished in Japan. I don't see Naito explode even more than he has is by going to America.
Just repeat that last little bit because it froze a little bit about just how you don't see Naito going and where edit that thing. That last little bit.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't see Naito getting any bigger in Japan. I think the only way that he can expand his career is by going to America, going to the Fed, going to AEW, doing something out of Japan. Because for me, he's done there.
What about Ibushi?
He doesn't translate very well. He can't.
Because he was very high on WWE's radar like a few years back. You know, cruiserweight tournament, meant to be the winner at one point, I believe.
He can't talk. Ibushi can't do anything other than work his ass off in the ring. His character is literally, I'm good at wrestling. And the only character development that he's ever had is halfway through a match, he just goes a bit psycho.
which there is a very good example of in Wrestle Kingdom 9 against Nakamura.
There is.
We'll go into more detail on that match later because I think that's a very good match to talk about.
With Ibushi as well, I think the only time I've ever seen him do character work is when he's paired with Kenny Omega.
As half of the Golden Lovers.
Yeah, who might be the most charismatic wrestler on the planet. And I think you could give him anyone, he'd make them an amazing character.
But would you argue that with respect? I mean, it's not stopped people who can't talk. That's never been a problem from a lot of other people have ended up getting signed. I mean, WWE, they signed Mystico Sin Cara and decided that he was going to be this Mystique thing, and it flopped.
I think when it comes to looking at who's going to get signed, you can't just look because I think anyone in New Japan's roster could get signed, but I don't want to see any of them get signed because they're where they are for a reason. Because New Japan is WWE's level. They draw the same number of crowds. They've got the same level of TV deals in Japan as America, as do we have in America. They're the same level. So I think any wrestler can work for either company and be taken as a legitimate wrestler. But it's the same way you don't really want to see someone like Braun Strowman in Japan because although they would sign him, he wouldn't work.
No.
And that's the same way I look at Ibushi.
I think the only big man that worked in New Japan was Lance Archer.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd argue Albert is, giant Bernard. He had a successful run, and obviously that's what actually brought him back to WWE. And obviously, Tensai flopped. But
I think there's a big difference between Albert and Lance Archer and Braun Strowman. The difference being Lance Archer and Braun Strowman are meant to be like these massive, larger than human kind of strongmen characters, and then you've got Albert, who's more of, because he had a very traditional gimmick when he was in Japan. He was very he fit in with a lot of the other New Japan wrestlers because you've got to remember half the roster are genuine heavyweights, like they're all big guys, whereas Braun Strowman and Lance Archer are just giants, which is why I think they are very hit and miss when it comes to people like them. Like their size and stature and their strength just doesn't quite fit in with the hard-hitting style.
I agree.
Yeah, something obviously, that I've noticed with this strong style, and it's not just Japanese strong style, it's British strong style too, which it exists in, is obviously the whole point obviously of big guys like Braun Strowman is to get over the fact that he's strong and the fact that obviously he's powerful. But with kind of strong style, that doesn't really allow for that much, because strong style was obviously about taking that beating and getting back up. And as seen in matches, you know, again, even within the WWE's umbrella, that Walter versus Dragon, what's his name?
Drug, I can't say his name now. Ilya.
Draco Malfoy.
Ilya.
Ilya Dragunov.
Yeah, Ilya.
That's the one.
Yeah, that's the one. You know, that was a brutal match. And like, thing is, end of the day, you couldn't really put someone in a position where, like Braun Strowman, for instance, was going to like be battering someone and they're just going to, you know, fight back, unless it's like a Brock Lesnar. Do you know what I mean? This is like a reason for that person, but you couldn't. But I felt that while watching, like, obviously a couple matches that I have watched, obviously most of the recent one, we might talk about it. We've mentioned it a few times already. Obviously Shinsuke versus Ibushi. And the reason why I think that was actually quite a poignant one, because obviously both men obviously did end up in WWE, although Kota Ibushi's run was a short, limited run. But something which Porter didn't know this, but I don't know, you know this too, Shevin. But some of Ibushi's matches were on house shows, and they put those on the network.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can watch like Ibushi versus Buddy Murphy. They had like a whole house show.
Really?
Yeah. There's like a hidden gem section of the network.
Murphy's like my favorite wrestler.
That's
mad. That's like...
and then is it? Yeah, I mean, because he was going to get signed. You know, he was meant to. The original story goes that Kota Ibushi versus Zack Sabre Jr. was meant to be the final of the Cruiserweight Classic. And they decided that from when they literally signed people. But they did a typical WWE, which, as we know from earlier this year with Carlito, with them just not announcing him and then him being like, yeah, I wasn't ever going to come. But they did that, where they were like, this is our final, Ibushi will win, and Ibushi will go to the main show. And then Ibushi was like, yeah, I ain't signing. And then he left.
Yeah, I heard about that.
They had to change it to obviously what it became, Grand Metalik and TJP. TJP was meant to be out in like the first round or something. We didn't think anything of it. But anyway, the reason why the match is so pointed, yeah, both of them had a run, didn't they? Obviously, in WWE. Obviously, Ibushi's short. Shinsuke's obviously still going on and doing quite well. But that match in particular, like, why is it you recommended that match then, Jack? Like, you know, someone who, like me.
Originally, I was going to recommend the AJ Nakamura match, because I wanted to bring a match on to talk about it. And I wanted to talk about that match in particular because it happened in New Japan and then WWE. But I watched it back and it's not the Japanese style. It's a mix, which might be why it works so well. But as we talk about the Japanese style, I thought let's watch a old school kind of strong style match in a new school setting.
Yeah.
So, and I remember watching that match, and that match was the reason why I'm now I'd say Japanese wrestling fan. That's where I want to end up myself. I remember watching that match thinking like, this can't get better. And then it gets better and then gets better and then it finishes. But really the main reason is if you watch a lot of Japanese wrestling, I think Josh can back me up on this. It's really predictable. Like if there's a match between Okada and Naito, in your heart, you're like, well, Okada's going to win. And the whole first if it's a 20-minute match, the first 10 minutes is you're like, Okada's going to win. Okada's going to win. And then about the 15-minute mark, you're like, oh, maybe Naito could win. And then that last 15 minutes is just going, I don't know who's going to win. I don't know who's going to win. And then, boom, the finish. And then you've just realized that the whole match has just captivated you that I don't get with other companies. Like, I was watching the John Moxley Kenny Omega match the other day, and watching it, like, I just like the second it started, I was like, well, obviously Kenny's going to win, because when you have a tournament like that, you kind of need the tournament winner to either win or make a really good showing. And I think it's due time that Moxley lost the belt. And for me, the whole match was like, Kenny's going to win. And then the twist happened and he won. And for me, it wasn't a twist because I knew he was going to win in my heart. Like, I just knew it from the get-go. But with Japanese wrestling, I always know. But then halfway through, I don't. And that's what makes me really enjoy the matches. Especially with the match that I asked you to watch, the Kota Ibushi Nakamura, I knew Nakamura was going to win. But about halfway through, I didn't. Even though I've watched it countless times. When I watched it just before I came on, again, I was like, does Ibushi win this match? Does he win? Because he's such a believable babyface that you can't help but think he's going to win, especially when he does that kind of psycho change. If anyone who hasn't watched an Ibushi match, on these big matches, after he gets hit by a big move, he just kind of snaps, like his eyes kind of glaze over, and he just starts throwing legitimately like hard strikes. Like there's no give or no like work to it. He's just legit balling his fists up and just punching Nakamura in the back of the head. And I just think little stuff like that just makes the match, in my opinion. And then it forces Nakamura to also go to that level to fight back. And it's not a babyface versus heel. These both people are getting cheered by the crowd. Both of these people are considered good people, good guys, but Nakamura will do anything to win. And that's his character.
That's kind of what I noticed. I noticed that the match that I've watched seemed to be that people are quite neutral. Is that correct? Like,
there isn't
Wiener, I guess,
there isn't baby faces and heels. Like Okada is the face of the company. Everyone loves him, but his gimmick is he's got more money than you.
That's villainous, isn't it?
It's such a villainous gimmick, but because New Japan are more focused on the in-ring work, you can't help but cheer for him because he doesn't cheat. He plays everything by the books. He doesn't run the clock out. He doesn't do anything.
And again.
So it doesn't really translate to American audiences or British audience because it doesn't really focus on the character work, more the in-ring style. And I think that's why the Japanese wrestling stands out so much, especially with the match that I asked you to watch, the Ibushi Nakamura match. It's just something that no matter what, it's always one of the matches where I go, it's a good match. So it's always just a solid. It's not my favorite. It's probably not in my top 5, top 10, but it's just a completely solid match with no flaws.
Yeah, look, I watched it and I quite liked it. I had a few little bits from a bit like I didn't like that, but I liked it. I liked especially the kind of latter half of the match, like once it really builds up. I think as well, like Ibushi, what I find hard when watching Japanese wrestling or just watching wrestling in Japan, actually, because I must say most of my experience with this has been through, obviously, when WWE did Japanese tours in like mid-2000s, and when obviously they'd had the Beast in the East event, very underrated event, that, to be fair, back in, was it 2017, I think, Beast in the East. The Japanese crowds are very muted to certain things, and so it's very different to watch, like as a, I guess you'd say, traditional wrestling fan, where you're used to, obviously, a louder kind of response for stuff. But yeah, I quite like the match. The other thing I've had against Japanese wrestling is I don't like long matches. So this 20 minutes as a main event, was it main event?
No.
Oh,
okay. It was second main. The main event was Okada Tanahashi, which went 45 minutes.
Yeah, because I'm gonna say this here, like Omega and Okada bored me to tears. It's too long. I don't like Omega anyway.
Me and you are we're gonna fall out. We're gonna fall out, Lucas.
Just copy and paste Jim Cornette's opinion here, and I literally feel the same. Yeah,
I might as well copy and paste Jim Cornette's face on your head.
Right now. But I like this match though. I can see why Shinsuke in particular, how he's able to bring some of that stuff over, obviously he's now rolling WWE. Josh, you recently rewatched the match as well. I know you watched the match at the time. I guess it's one that you like too.
I genuinely believe that Ibushi versus Nakamura is one of the best examples of wrestling in New Japan. Not wrestling in Japan, wrestling in New Japan. Because they've got their very unique style where it's Japanese strong style with a little bit of flippy dippy bullshit. Not much.
Yep.
Very little bit.
I agree with that. Yeah, that's good.
I think there's only really 3 occasions off the top of my head. I can count how many occasions there were on my left hand without having to actually count. But Ibushi only did a few flips and a few dives. Very minimal, but they were all perfectly timed to work where they worked.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. I'd agree with that. I haven't watched that.
Yeah.
I didn't feel it's becoming excessive as we're kind of being more used to now with AEW. How I feel, AEW is every match in a dive, every angle is a dive, the fans start doing dives soon. The way it's going, but
they probably do anyway. Just
but,
pans to the top of the arena. Just the fans just jumped off the balcony.
It really wouldn't fucking surprise me nowadays. But look, final question before we go into the Pipe Bomb Primary Challenge. You haven't gotten out of that. Is so yeah, with obviously New Japan running the USA, NXT obviously rumored to be going to Japan at some point, and with obviously what's going on with the AEW, obviously holding they've had champions. Had Japanese champions on their roster, such as Jon Moxley and Kenny Omega. Like, is it possible that we're going to just see more talent, kind of a more openness to the Japanese wrestling and the Japanese style? Even we touched on here, New Japan came to obviously England as well to do a show. So where before they were kind of isolated, because how I felt, and this is what I said before we started recording, is the Japanese and the American audiences or American products are very, very stubborn. And it's sense of, a lot of the Japan was happy to be its island thing and be like, okay, we're going to be by ourselves over here. And America were like, we got our way, we're right. But now with New Japan running in America, WWE wanting to get into Japan, like, are we now going to be seeing more of this talent kind of shared out about?
I think with wrestling, you only go as far as your wrestlers. I don't think New Japan would be coming over to England if it wasn't for wrestlers like Sabre or Ospreay. I think a lot of people who follow wrestlers more than companies went to New Japan with people like Ospreay. So I know my brother is a massive New Japan fan, but he wasn't a New Japan fan until he followed Ospreay over.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But now he's just as much as a big fan as I am. He watches every New Japan show. He's proper translated to what he prefers in wrestling now. And I think a lot of companies are the same. For example, I don't think America was a big Japanese wrestling fan until people like the Bucks and Omega and all them people brought their audience to Japan. And I think that's what's given New Japan a platform. Because I know that you don't watch New Japan, Lucas, but I think Josh can agree. When New Japan tried to go Western about 2 years ago, it was terrible. It was really unenjoyable to watch because they tried to make everything a story, everything an angle, and it just doesn't work when your talent doesn't speak or aren't as trained as like actor-wise as people in the West. A lot of the times when companies do go overseas because they've got big attraction. For example, like India, they're doing the WWE India with Mahal as their main guy.
Yeah.
I think if they didn't have Mahal, they wouldn't be going over there.
Oh no, I agree. It's not.
I think Japan is the same thing. I don't think New Japan ever goes, let's go to America. I think what happens is the American audience asks for New Japan to come to them, and that's how they go. I think that's what makes them in such a high demand rather than WWE that willingly go everywhere. I think that's why people are like, oh, okay, cool. Now they're going to India. Now they're going to Saudi Arabia. Now they're going here, because it seems like every other week they're in a new place. But with Japan, it's like they're going to England for the first time since, I think it was like the first time since the 80s, 90s.
They've never had their own show in England.
Was it their first
It was
one?
always with Ring of Honor or some other promotion. They've never been to England and hosted their own show until Royal Quest.
Oh, okay. I thought they'd done their own ones ages ago, but no.
They've done stuff, but they've never done a pay-per-view style thing. They had like little events, but this is their biggest event on their own in England that wasn't with Ring of Honor or Progress or someone.
Yeah, so I think that just like severates my point. They've got a champion in Will Ospreay. At the time, was the never openweight champion, I believe.
No, he was the
junior weight,
junior heavyweight champion.
Junior heavyweight champion.
Because he was tag teaming with Robbie Eagles. I can't remember who he was against. Well, I think he was against Bullet Club. Jay White.
Yeah, it was El Phantasmo and Ishimori.
Oh, was it?
No, it was.
I think it was Jay White.
I thought it was Roppongi 3K.
Jay White was in a tag match with another member of Bullet Club.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's all I remember.
It's a New Japan show. There's always tag matches. But I think what was important about that show is they had the big name in Will Ospreay, who was big in Japan and big in the UK, and they put him on the first match. So then only from there on out, you had New Japan talent. So a lot of people who were going there because it's in London and it's a wrestling show, who hasn't seen people like Goto or people like Ibushi or anything like that, are seeing them for the first time in these big main events, which is really good, because I left there being an even bigger fan of Okada because I saw him live. I think Okada's one of them wrestlers who you don't realise how good he is until you watch him live, and then you just got a completely new respect of why he is the best in the world. And I think that's really important to do.
After Shane McMahon.
Of course, after Shane McMahon.
I think a standout match there, because obviously recently we did the indie wrestling episode. I think a standout match for there was the Gorillas of Destiny from the Bullet Club taking on Aussie Open.
Oh yeah, that was a great match.
Because Aussie Open are a massive tag team here in the UK, especially in Progress Wrestling. So having one of our indie teams show up for New Japan, because I think that was their first New Japan match.
Yeah, it was.
Because now they're out there quite a lot.
Yeah, I think that was their first New Japan match, and I think I could be wrong, but I think they've got a tie-in with DDT with Chris Brooks.
Possibly,
yeah. I think that's how they got their name out there, was that Royal Quest show.
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
really important to do when you're traveling to a new place is to use local talent, but not before your big name talent.
Yeah,
because I think that's what's important, to stagger out these kind of traveling shows.
Yeah, we was talking about this in a few episodes really, where obviously essentially like, you know, something which AEW is able to do, and obviously this would be more interesting again once fans can come back, is they can lend talent from these smaller promotions, whereas with WWE obviously it's contracted people only, and so it's something to give an edge to the show. And you mentioned obviously the overexposure, like WWE is overexposed. It knows it is, as well, and obviously. To be fair, it wasn't for the Global Bastard. Like, they would have ran as usual last year with thousands of tours and that going on. But yeah, look, it's been great to have this snapshot of Japan. Like, you know, there's so much more I think we could obviously go into detail with. But I was really pleased, you know, that I've got some food for thought kind of thing, you know, going into how I approach watching some more Japanese stuff. Because I can see that its presentation may be different, but its goal and its heart and its ethos is still there. I think that's key, and I look forward to seeing, obviously, if there are movements in terms of some of the tours that are able to happen and able to, I think, you know, them being able to team up and do some more stuff with AEW. Obviously, once stuff is, you know, safe to do so, that could be something which I guess could be really, really special for fans worldwide. But as you know, you're not getting away from the podcast without this dreaded moment.
I thought I'd get away from this.
Is of course coming to you, Porto. It's the Pipe Bomb Promo Challenge.
The one thing that everyone hates.
I remember I'd done it once. It was really well. It went really well, and I thought, brilliant. That's the one time I've got to do it. Set the bar high, and now I'm back, and I just haven't got anything.
But you are the first Talking Crap guest that has competed in 2 Pipe Bomb promo challenge
Yes.
season.
Does that exempt me from doing it?
No, if anything, that's more encouragement to do it.
Oh, it's not. That's not the one.
Right, so you already know the rules, but I'm going to say them anyway for the fans at home. You have 1 minute to give us a promo with 2 topics, or 3 topics that I've given you.
3 topics. Cool. Yep.
And you'll be scored out of 10, 5 points by me, 5 points by Lucas. However, different to when you first did the Pipe Bomb Promo Challenge, we have teams now.
Oh, teams.
For this episode, you are on Team Josh, so my team.
The best team.
However, we don't have to worry because you can't get lower than Joe Lando, who pretty much didn't want to do it. So yeah, do you understand the rules?
Yes.
Good. Allow me 1 moment to get a timer up.
Oh God, there's timing everything.
Oh yeah, I've got to time it. You can't not do it correctly.
We'll see how that ends.
So your 2 topics are: you will be at Wrestle Kingdom. At New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom, facing Kenny Omega for the New Japan Pro Wrestling Intercontinental Championship.
Brilliant.
Your 1 minute to give us a promo starts now.
My name is Jack Walker, and on the 4th of January, I will be facing Kenny Omega for the NJPW Intercontinental Champion at the grandest stage of them all, Wrestle Kingdom. Now, I respect Kenny Omega, I do, but you're past your prime. You've lost it. You've now got to rely on your friends, your buddies, your little club. And unfortunately, they won't be here. Due to the COVID regulations, we only allow 1 people at ringside. And unfortunately, that's going to be the doctors, the medics, because that's the only way you'll be able to leave Wrestle Kingdom when I'm through with you. So Kenny Omega, look after that belt because I will be taking it off you and I will be the king of Wrestle Kingdom.
Oh, 2 seconds.
Over
2
or
seconds
under?
out. Under.
Oh,
But
you
do you know
just growled.
Just
Just
start
made a noise
cheering.
for 2
Yeah.
seconds. I was going to fault you for getting the name of the title wrong, but I realised I did it as well. It's not the New Japan Pro Wrestling Intercontinental Championship. It's the IWGP, which is obviously the
I
New
did the
Japan...
NJPW. Oh,
Yeah.
God.
NJPW. Yeah, we
It's
both
not
did it.
that.
No, it's the
Oh,
IWGP, but
We can't fault that. You
I
gave the
can't
wrong
fault
belt.
you because I said it wrong the first time. I was sitting there
It's a
going,
new title. No, it's a new title.
I was sitting there like, oh,
Made
he's
by
wrong.
me.
He's going to have to lose a point. Then I thought to myself, wait, no, I did that. Other than that, I can't deduct an entire point for you being 2 seconds off.
I appreciate that.
So yeah, I'm gonna have to go with I'm just gonna go with a 5. I couldn't find any faults with it. Other than the one mistake that I caused, I couldn't think of any issues with it.
That's a solid promo. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know the belt was called IWGP. I just assumed it would make sense that it's NJPW, so it should be their belt.
They've got a governing body called IWGP, which is essentially just their championships.
Okay, makes sense.
What's it? The International Grand Prix Wrestling Championship.
Something like that, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
International Wrestling Grand Prix or something.
That's
Did it
the
hurt
one,
you
yeah.
to say those nasty things about Omega? Kind of hurt up it.
Nah, sod him.
Yeah, I guess if you end up on Wrestle Kingdom.
Oh.
But look, 4.5 for me.
That's cold.
4.5.
You just don't want me to get 10 out of 10. That's what it is.
9.5 is low. That's low. That's good.
I think that's the highest score we've ever had. Yes, I think the highest anyone's ever had is a 9.
Oh, until
I
me.
believe so, yeah. I
Yeah.
believe so.
It's all about the pink hydro flask. That's what's done it.
So not only have you not scored as low as Joe Lando,
Oi, Buzz.
but you've not scored lower than anyone else. So
I am the bar.
Okay, Shane.
I think that's like 2 record breakers we've had in 2 seasons in a row.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
It's good. It's
Start
good
cutting
stuff.
promos now.
It's good stuff. But look, it's been great catching up. Been great being able to discuss some wrestling with you. Of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is the kind of content you enjoy. We're coming at you next week with our special guest, our returning guest, our most prolific and featured guest of all time, Vinny Daniels will be here, and we'll be discussing something very different from Japanese wrestling. And we'll be discussing celebrity involvement in wrestling. So everything from your Dennis Rodmans, David Arquette's, through to the Raw guest host era, and of course that Snoop Splash. That's coming up next week. Until then, I've been Luca Jackson, John Majay, Josh Porter. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Take it easy.